For several decades in the 19th century, at the height of the Industrial Revolution, wages stagnated. The economy continued to grow, machines became increasingly productive, but the gap between workers and capitalists, and even between highly skilled and less skilled workers, grew even wider. This period, in which automation seemingly held wages in check and drove inequality sky high, is known as Engels' Pause, in honor of Karl Marx's co-author. And the fact is, this period was absolutely crucial for the formation of socialist ideas. Well, with artificial intelligence, exactly the same thing could happen.
AI could accelerate global inequality, new White House report warns. AI's economic benefits, ranging from higher productivity to growth in high-value sectors, are likely to accrue unevenly.
The White House warns of a tech-driven escalation of inequality. Of course, the exact opposite could also happen. AI is unlike any other technical revolution. Neither the discovery of fire, the steam engine, nor the internet can compare. And we're not saying this because AI is going to be more revolutionary than fire, but due to the kind of change it's going to bring about in the economy. Until now, the norm has been for machines to replace less skilled workers, those performing the simplest, most mechanical and repetitive tasks. However, these days, AI can program and compose poems, but it cannot unload pallets from a truck, and that changes everything. Of course, we're not being alarmist about AI, but as with all changes, there are always winners and losers. And do you know who stands to lose the most in all of this? Well, the usual suspects: young people. According to a study by Stanford University, artificial intelligence has become a barrier for those looking to enter the job market. The reason? Companies, especially in sectors like programming, have stopped hiring juniors. Just like that, the employability of newcomers has fallen by 16%. And what are they doing instead? Well, they're developing AI agents capable of performing complex tasks, cheaper, faster, and without a welcome coffee. That said, senior employees are still doing just fine. In fact, we could say that AI has been a godsend for them. Mastering this new technology and being able to delegate programming and related tasks has made them much more productive. And in the job market, despite many alarmist news stories, that increased productivity has companies fighting to hire them. This is a bit like the Jevons paradox. During the Industrial Revolution, it was thought that building more efficient engines would reduce coal consumption. But when those more efficient engines arrived, what happened was that demand for them skyrocketed, and coal ran out a little faster than ever. Or to put it another way, since older workers are more productive, companies don't lay them off. Instead, they compete to hire them to boost their output. And clearly, that's reflected in their pay. But what about the juniors? Well, in their case, they don't advance as much. They are the ones who used to do the simplest tasks, the ones most easily replaceable by an AI agent. Now, does this mean that young people are doomed? Well, let's not jump to conclusions. After all, what we've just seen is the result of a study, but that doesn't mean that result will hold up in the long run. Consider that after COVID, the US labour market heated up like crazy, and now it might simply be returning to normal, while young people are the ones paying the price. That said, even taking this into account, the Stanford study is clear. In sectors where AI is making a strong impact, the gap between juniors and seniors is much wider. So to be fair, AI isn't the main villain, but it is the salt rubbed into an open wound. In any case, the issue of inequality isn't just about the gap between young and old. We must also pay close attention to income inequality in general. Many people worry that this new technology will skyrocket corporate profits while crushing those of the working class. More profits at the expense of human well-being. Yet, there are prominent economists who point in the exact opposite direction.
My thesis is not a forecast, but an argument about what is possible. AI, if used well, can help restore the middle-class heart of the US labor market that has been hollowed out by automation and globalization.
You've just heard from David Autor, one of the most influential economists on the planet. Does the term China shock in globalization ring a bell? Well, this is the guy who coined the term for the phenomenon, and according to him, artificial intelligence isn't here to destroy, but to level the playing field. Yes, you heard correctly. For Autor, AI could be the great social equalizer. Why? Because it automates precisely what was once considered elite work. Intellectual tasks, complex analysis, professional writing. But there's more. According to this vision, AI can also accelerate learning. That is, teach faster, train better prepared people, and narrow the gap between the best and worst workers in the same sector. And is this just theory? Well, no. We already have proof. For example, a group of researchers gave a team of workers whose job was basically writing emails access to ChatGPT. The result, those who used AI were 40% more productive. Not only were they faster, but they wrote better. But here's the interesting part. It wasn't the top performers who improved the most, but rather the slowest workers, the ones who used to make the most mistakes. With the help of AI, that bottom 10% reached the level of the average worker who wasn't using any tools. In other words, AI leveled the playing field, even when top performers were using it too. And these kinds of results have been replicated in many other sectors, from customer service in call centers to data analysis.
Our key finding is that AI substantially reduces wage inequality while raising average wages by 21%. AI's equalizing effect is fully driven by simplification, enabling workers across skill levels to compete for the same jobs.
Okay, but wait a minute. Doesn't this directly contradict what we said earlier? If AI helps the least skilled the most, why are companies stopping hiring juniors? It looks like a contradiction. If newcomers improve so much with AI, wouldn't it make sense to hire more juniors and lay off the more expensive ones? Well, here's the catch. We've only told you half the story. It's true that many studies show how AI reduces workplace inequality, but there are just as many that say the exact opposite. If we go over to GitHub, the largest global forum where programmers share their code, we find two statistics that give us pause. First, 30% of all Python code, one of the most widely used languages in the world, is already written by artificial intelligence. 1/3, that is absolutely staggering. Second, only the most experienced programmers are capitalizing on this revolution. And here's the curious part. Although senior developers use AI 10% less than junior developers, they manage to be 6% more efficient. In contrast, beginners don't improve or even get worse. But first, if you're interested in the world of investing, if you want to learn how to manage your savings, protect yourself against inflation, and figure out how to make more money beyond your day job, well, I've got some good news for you. At Visual Factory, we have created the Visual Factory Club, a newsletter where every week we send out free content focused on essential financial education, the ABC of what everyone should know to understand the stock market, financial markets in general, investment platforms, how to assess investment opportunities, and which markets may have more or less potential. Because of course, if you want to invest your money so you're not at the mercy of your country's economic instability, you at least need to understand the basics of the financial world. In the Visual Factory Club, you learn all of this completely free of charge. Through the link below and this QR code on the screen, you can sign up for the club and start receiving the upcoming editions. What's more, when you sign up, you'll receive a dossier where I explain in a clear and simple way the most essential investment concepts, what multiples or the PE ratio are, what indices are, ETFs, derivatives, funds, EPS. You get the idea. After that, every week you'll receive additional materials and market analysis to help you stay informed about what's going on. And by the way, the sooner you sign up, the better, since we send each episode of the series by email, and every edition is unique. If you're not subscribed, you might miss some of them and you won't be able to access them later. But with that said, let's get back to this video. So, what on earth is going on here? Why does AI sometimes seem to level the playing field and other times accentuate the differences? For once, the answer is actually quite simple. If you look closely, most studies claiming that AI reduces inequalities focus on very specific and simple tasks. Responding to emails, looking up data in a manual, writing small functions with a very specific goal. But of course, when the task gets complicated, for example, developing an entire software program rather than just a single function, things change completely. Here, it's no longer enough to just know how to give commands to AI. You need judgment, experience, and to know what you're actually doing. That's why we always say that using AI professionally isn't the same as asking ChatGPT. That's why when we analyze the entire GitHub ecosystem, not just an isolated experiment, we see that top programmers use AI less, but they use it better. And it shows. And keep in mind, this isn't just true for programming. In another experiment, economists analyzed what happened when entrepreneurs in Kenya used ChatGPT as a business advisor. The result, experienced entrepreneurs became much more productive, but the novices went bankrupt before they even got started. And there's more. My favorite example is college debates. Here, there's no to-do list or clear metrics. You simply compete face to face against another human being. And guess what happened?
Those with high scores at baseline benefit from ChatGPT. They improve by an amount equivalent to a 0.8 standard deviation increase compared to control students, while those with lower baseline debate scores do not benefit at all.
A 0.8 standard deviation, for those of you not familiar with statistics, is absolutely staggering, a massive improvement in performance. Anyway, the conclusion seems pretty clear. AI is going to increase inequality within the workplace because the best workers know how to get the most out of it, design automated work ecosystems, and know how to strategically delegate their tasks to technology. Well, so far, we've seen how AI can increase inequality between the best prepared professionals and those with less training. But that doesn't mean inequality is increasing across the entire economy. Novice programmers might lose out to those with more experience. But what happens when we compare programmers to other, more physical jobs? Here, things get even more complicated, especially since there are no historical precedents. But well, at least we have to try. First, take a look at this graph. You're seeing the impact of automation on wages between 1980 and 2014. As you can see, the poorest 70% lost out, earning about 5% less. Of course, in the long run, these workers move to other jobs where they earn more. And it's clear that automation makes us all much richer. For instance, by lowering the cost of groceries. But in the short term, there is a noticeable drop in some wages. We'll now take a look at this estimate of the impact of AI. Like any estimate, it should be taken with a grain of salt, but it's the best we have. Unlike with the Industrial Revolution, or the telecommunications boom and globalization, everything points to the fact that this time, the richest 20% will lose out, and less skilled workers will earn more. Using data from England, this model predicts that inequality will fall by 1.5 percentage points. Okay, it's not much, but at least it won't skyrocket. I'm sure many of you were hoping for something better, but hey, we've avoided the catastrophic scenario. Or at least, that's what it looks like at first glance. Yes, it's exactly what you're thinking. The reality is even more complex. Earlier, we said that AI can program, but it can't unload a pallet from a truck. Well, be careful with that statement, because if we dig a little deeper, the story isn't that simple. It turns out, according to this same study, less skilled workers are much more exposed to AI than it seems at first glance. Check out this data. Only 15% of workers in the top 10% can be replaced by a machine. Among the rest, however, the figure skyrockets to 60%. And if we also remember that the most skilled workers are the ones who know best how to use AI to boost their productivity, the picture becomes clearer. The likely outcome, the wealthier half of the labor market will reap a large share of the benefits generated by the poorer half. But if you thought that was the end of it, I got some bad news. So far, we've talked about inequality among workers. Who earns more? Who adapts best to AI? Will it automate well-paying jobs and make the economy more equal? Crucial questions. But there's an even more important one. How will AI affect the relationship between workers and capitalists? Because one thing is clear, robots are going to do more and more tasks, but they won't work for themselves, they'll work for their owners. In other words, owning robots is like owning stocks. You don't have to lift a finger, capital works for you. And as long as you don't make disastrous decisions, that capital will keep generating more wealth on its own. Well, AI is capital, and the impact this could have is enormous. In this chart, you can compare the impact of AI on wages versus its impact on returns on capital. And here are two things that really stand out. Number one, no one loses out. Both the poorest and the richest will earn significantly more money. And number 2, the richest, especially the top 5%, will benefit much more. This is because the wealthy tends to get more out of their investments, even when adjusted for their risk profile. Of course, we must also keep in mind that capital income is a very, very small percentage of the income of the poorest workers. This has led many economists to believe that AI could drive inequality to unprecedented levels. The logic is simple. Most workers can't keep up with the machines. And who owns the machines? Exactly. The capitalists. The more money they make, the more machines they buy. They upgrade the ones they already have. They automate more tasks. They lay off more employees. And the cycle repeats. A cycle that never stops, and one in which the same people always win. If you're really into this stuff, the idea probably sounds familiar. It's the famous thesis of Thomas Piketty, one of the world's best-known economists. The guy who wrote Capital in the 21st century. A book with a powerful thesis, and one that was completely wrong. Just as his book was published, inequality between workers and capitalists began to plummet. But wait, maybe the problem was just in the title, and Capital in the 22nd century turns out to be a smash hit. So what? Are we doomed to a dystopia where AI creates brutal and permanent inequality? Well, no, at least not so fast. This is one of the few things we can talk about with some certainty. To understand why, we need to discuss a key concept: the substitutability of labor and capital. What happens if wages rise by 10%? How much more capital will companies invest to replace workers? 10? 50%? 1%? For Piketty's nightmare to come true, this ratio would have to be well above 1. Technically, it would have to be infinite. But it isn't. Most studies agree. It's below 0.5, a far cry from the apocalypse. And besides, capital isn't like Scrooge McDuck's mountain of gold. It doesn't just pile up on its own. It also deteriorates, breaks down, loses value, and that changes everything.
Even if there are no constraints on land, labor, energy, or anything else, a different problem arises. The same technological progress that makes substitution easy also renders last year's AI obsolete. Rapid progress increases depreciation through obsolescence. Your GPU doesn't depreciate just because circuits break. Instead, it depreciates because next year's model makes it less valuable, and investors must be compensated for that loss of value.
By the way, there's a rather curious consequence to all this. If you really believe that machines are going to completely replace humans, then you should be against taxing robots to fund a basic income or something like that. I know it sounds strange, but pay attention because it makes a lot of sense. The more the economy depends on capital, the more damage a capital tax does. According to the study we mentioned earlier, a 15% tax could reduce production by 30% and wages by another 10%. The result? A slightly more equal society with the Gini index 3.5 points lower, but one that's much poorer. But setting that aside, there's another critical reason why AI isn't going to radically change inequality, neither for the better nor for the worse. And that reason is bottlenecks. Imagine you can automate 99% of a process. It doesn't matter if it's manufacturing a product or providing a service. As long as there's 1% that can't be automated, that 1% will determine everything. Wages don't depend on how many tasks you perform, but on how irreplaceable you are. A clear example: compare an architect to a construction worker. The worker does most of the labor, but without the blueprints, without the design, without the architect's technical expertise, the project goes nowhere. And since there are few architects, their salaries are much higher. Not because of the amount of work, but because of their crucial role. Well, the same thing happens with AI. As machines take on repetitive tasks, we humans will increasingly focus on the bottlenecks, on what cannot be automated. And this isn't just theory, it's happened before. Let's play a game. On the screen, you see two lines. Both represent the evolution of bank tellers' wages. The red line shows what they would have earned if ATMs had perfectly replaced humans. That is, if they were 100% interchangeable. The blue line, on the other hand, takes into account the famous bottlenecks. Small tasks that seem irrelevant, but are irreplaceable. Can you guess which one is closer to reality? Exactly. The blue one. Because even though ATMs automated more than 80% of the work, wages didn't drop by 60%, as the perfect substitution model predicted. On the contrary, they rose by more than 50%. And with AI, everything points to this effect being even greater. The moral of the story: inequality is unlikely to change radically. Does AI replace intellectual jobs? yes. But as long as it doesn't replace them 100%, and that's wishful thinking, those jobs will continue to be well paid, even better paid than they are now. So, is there nothing to worry about? Well, yes, because the only truly alarming inequality isn't between workers, it's between countries. In theory, poor countries should grow faster. They just have to copy what already works in rich countries. They don't need to invent anything new. But in practice, that gap is widening, and not just between the global north and south. The US is growing faster than Europe, despite being much richer. And that has nothing to do with AI. It has to do with institutions, with the rules of the game, with growth models. In the end, the real gap will be between countries with economic models that allow them to harness the potential of AI and those that don't. But at this point, now it's your turn. Will AI drive inequality to unsustainable levels? Or will it help level the playing field by automating the most elite tasks? Or perhaps nothing significant will change, because in the end, will it all come down to those bottlenecks? You can leave your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget that here on Visualeconomik, we release new videos every week, so subscribe if you haven't already to make sure you don't miss any of our upcoming episodes. If you like this video, hit like, and I'll see you in the next one. All the best. Until next time.